Hey y'all, who dat and what is up? I am Jeff Nowak, and this is another preview edition of Inside Black and Gold. Yes, 1-6. So we're still doing the traditional preview episodes as if the games matter. I will not commit to doing this all the way through the season, but there's still time. At least until the bye week, we're going to keep doing this. We're going to keep talking about the matchup, the other teams. We're going to have a crossover with a reporter from the other side, get an idea of what we're talking about. Because right now, the games still matter, even though, as Mickey Loomis put it, this is a development year. That will continue. I reserve the right to not do these in the traditional sense as we get down the line. Kind of like last year, I think after like week 13 or 14, we kind of just went back into a normal podcasting schedule and just kind of did episodes and almost forgot the games were coming up. But we're not going to do that yet. I still have faith there's a few wins left on this schedule, and I think this could be one of them. Now, I'm not going to go too far down that rabbit hole. I'm not going to put money on the equation, but I think this game does set up pretty well for the Saints. I think, I don't know, Baker Mayfield's giving the Saints some bulletin board material, and I don't know why you would do that if you were Baker, but hey, Baker's going to bake. Either way, it's going to be a fun episode. The first segment's going to be injuries. As we do, the Bucs have 18 players listed on their injury report. 18. That is a third of their roster. And that doesn't even include Mike Evans, who has already been sent to injured reserve. So we're going to break it all down. I'm going to go through the entire list. It's going to take a while, but I feel like we should talk about it. After that's going to be the Brees and Stuff segment, which is going to be, again, mostly end stuff. We're going to hear from Brandon Staley, Doug Nussmeier, and we're going to hear from the man in the title himself, Drew Brees, during his weekly spot on WWL, kind of previewed the matchup, what he would be selling the team on this week for motivations. Then we're going to bring on James Yarcho and my esteemed co-host Steve Geller to break down the Week 8 matchup, what the Saints should be expecting, what the Bucs are bringing to town, all that good stuff. And then, as always, we're going to close out with the X Factors. A lot of interesting numbers that play into this matchup. Can the Saints run the ball? I'm not confident, but we'll talk about it. But all right, who dat? Let's hit a quick break. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do that. Make sure to ring the bell on YouTube at WWL Sports. Make sure to leave a rating and review wherever you get your podcast. If you're on Apple Podcasts, hey, do me a favor, hit the button there. It says review, and do something with it. Whether it's a star, whether it's more than a star, whether it's 4 or 5 stars, whether it's just words, whether you just want to put 3 exclamation points, I don't care. Whether you want to tell me which cards you want from my collection, I'll send it to you. That's only kind of halfway a joke. Like I actually probably would if you give me your information. I need to do something with some of these cards. I have too many. I'm going to have to do a fire sale out at the game on Sunday. But either way, who dat? Go Saints. Stick around. And we are back on Inside Black and Gold, our preview edition for Saints Bucs. The Saints are 1-6. They're trying to win more games than they have. They're trying to double their win total against the NFC South leading Tampa Bay Buccaneers at 5-2. But this is an injured Buccaneers team, even at 5-2. It doesn't seem to matter. They always seem to find a way to win. But is this the week? Is this the week, or was last week the week that the injuries really started catching up to them? And maybe can the Saints do some of the same stuff that the Lions did? I don't know. It's a short week. Guys are sore. Why not? Why not us? Either way, let's go through the injury report. I'm going to flash up the Saints side of the equation to my left. And hey, it's not a long list. And it's something that you look at and you say, yes, you had 2 season-ending injuries last week. And yes, that's a bummer. Eric McCoy done for the year with a torn biceps. By the way, it's biceps with an S. There's no such thing as a bicep. You can look it up. You have biceps muscles in both arms. That's what Eric McCoy tore. And everyone kind of says the same thing when you ask him about it. It's like, you just hate it for the guy because he's such an important player, because he works so hard, because he's so motivational. He's a multiplier for that group. And when you lose him, you lose a lot more than just a center. But the Saints are going to move forward. They're going to start Luke Fortner, a veteran player. Doug Nussmeier asked him about him today, and Doug has said, hey, He's a pro, right? That's why you brought him in. And it's kind of the cliche quote, but it's also true. Like, why did you go get Luke Fortner in the preseason? Because in the eventuality that you needed to play someone instead of Eric McCoy, you wanted a player who had been there before. You wanted a player who had started games at the NFL level, and that you wouldn't feel like, man, we just have no idea what to expect from this guy, right? And that would be the case if you went to Torricelli Simpkins at UDFA, if you tried to shift Cesar Ruiz over to center to the position he played in college, but has really not played much at the NFL level. Yeah, big question mark. So that's really why he's here. And that's why it always kind of made sense to me that you were going to start Luke Fortner. Kendre Miller also on injured reserve. The Saints signed Velus Jones from the practice squad back to the active roster, and also signed Audric Estime, former Broncos running back, and spent time on the Eagles practice squad last year. I'm sure that was a big part of why they brought him in, because he is already familiar with Kellen Moore and his system. Those players are done for the year, but when you look at the Saints injury report as it exists this week, it's another week where you're like, all right, this is about as good as you can hope for, right? So Chris Olave was the only player that missed on Wednesday with an injury. He returned on Thursday in a limited capacity, so you'd expect him to go. It's something he's been dealing with. We've seen him leave the game briefly, get his ankle taped up multiple times throughout the course of this season. Just something he's going to navigate. Doesn't seem to be slowing him down any. He had 5 catches for 98 yards, a 58-yard reception, 2 touchdowns in that game. So you expect him to continue to kind of battle through it. And I think that's what people miss about Chris Olave. He's a tough dude. He might not be the most physical receiver in the world, but he's a tough guy. He's played through a lot in his career, and he's continuing to play through a lot. The other 2 guys who missed Wednesday's practice did return on Thursday. That was Alontae Taylor, who was dealing with a personal issue. We don't know what that was, but he's back. Chase Young, who had an illness, he was back today. So that's a good sign that not only, we knew it was an illness, so it wasn't an injury, but also that only kept him out 1 day, which means it wasn't anything major. You say illness, that can mean a lot of different things. Getting back after 1 day is positive. Both guys are full participants, so that's a good thing. And you have Juwan Johnson dealing with a neck issue. He's been on a red jersey. It's going to be something to watch. I expect him to play, but will he be limited? We'll have to keep an eye on it. Alvin Kamara, limited with an ankle, limited with that same ankle issue he's been managing. Again, he's played through it each of the last 2 weeks. I expect him to play, but it's just one of those things that you got to wonder over the course of a season. You're navigating an ankle injury every week. Is that kind of limiting a running back and how he's able to impact the game? Because I don't know if he's had the impact you want to see from Alvin Kamara over the last month, and you're going to need him going forward, considering you no longer have Kendre Miller, who I think was running pretty well. Last name for the Saints, Devon Godchaux. And if you haven't figured it out by now, rest day. He's been getting Thursdays off. This is the same thing. You can pretty much chalk it up that every Thursday he's going to be added to the injury report. Fully expect him to play. And that's it. That is your injury report. The only other change for the Saints is John Ridgeway is no longer on the list because he has officially been activated to the roster. I'd be surprised if he was active this week, but you had to bring him back on Wednesday. Otherwise, he would have been done for the year because that was the end of his 21-day practice window. They maxed out. They dragged it out as long as they possibly could. And I honestly wouldn't be surprised if ultimately he got cut and moved and signed to the practice squad. I just don't know if there's a spot for him because defensive line, hey, say what you want about them. They're all available. Now, on the other side, turn the page to the Bucs injury report. And it's a comically long list. If I didn't know any better, I would think they were just trolling the Saints with all these names. So let's just go through it. Let's start with the players who were DMPs each on Wednesday and Thursday. That's quarterback Teddy Bridgewater, who's dealing with a tooth issue or a teeth issue. They have it as plural. So maybe he's dealing with multiple teeth. I don't know what happened. He hasn't practiced each of the last 2 days. Wide receiver Chris Godwin also didn't practice. He's listed with a fibula injury. Bucky Irving didn't practice with foot and shoulder issues. And then outside linebacker Hassan Reddick, ankle and knee issues, DMP both days. They have already ruled out Chris Godwin and Bucky Irving. Hassan Reddick also sounds like a no-go. So those are big names that they're not going to have, but they also knew in advance they weren't going to have them. The name that's really interesting is nose tackle Vita Vea, who was added to the injury report on Thursday. I say added, they didn't actually practice on Wednesday because they came off Monday Night Football, so they only held a walkthrough, so the injury report was estimated. But anytime you get added to the injury report late in the week, it's something to watch. And, a big dude with a foot injury, You just never know how that's going to shape up. I expect him to play. I'm not going to bank. If I'm the Saints, I'm not going to bank on him not playing. But, if he's limited in any form or fashion, that's a benefit to the Saints because, like we talked about, they're breaking in a new center this week. The other names on the injury report who were limited on Thursday, they were all upgraded from DNPs on Wednesday. That's Levante David. He's dealing with a knee/rib issue. That's Emeka Ibuka, who's dealing with a hamstring issue. He played through it last week. He's their wide receiver 1 now, so that's going to be one to watch. Defensive tackle Greg Gaines, toe issue, limited. Guard Luke Haggard, shoulder issue, limited. Defensive back Christian Izzian, knee issue, limited. And then safety Antoine Winfield, toe issue, limited. So if it sounds like these are a lot of the key players on this Bucs roster, you'd be right. Then there was a handful of players who were full participants. Most of them were upgraded from limited on Wednesday. That group includes linebacker Marquise Watts. He missed with a personal issue, so it was not an injury. It's a participation report at the end of the day. Guard Ben Bredesen, shoulder issue. Tight end Devin Culp, knee issue. Guard Michael Jordan, knee issue. Quarterback Baker Mayfield, knee issue. Cornerback Zion McCollum. I always find that name funny. Now that CJ McCollum's not in New Orleans anymore, it's not as funny, but I've always appreciated that name because it just sounds like the kind of couple's name for Zion Williamson and CJ McCollum. But hey, moving on. Then running back Josh Williams in the concussion protocol. He's been a full participant each of the last 2 days. Then the injury on there that I really look at is Baker Mayfield, just because, hey, he's a guy that likes to move around. He scrambles. It's one of the things that makes him so difficult to defend is, he's not the fastest guy in the world. He might not be the best athlete in the world, but he understands space and time and when to run. When he needs that first down conversion with his legs, he finds it. And he can be infuriating because he's really strong in his lower body. And guys, you think you have him, then you just kind of fall off him. And then he runs for 6-8 yards on a play that should have been a 2-yard sack. And that's how he changes game. Now, obviously, he also changes games with his arm. But what makes him infuriating to play against are his legs and how he uses those, especially when he can scramble and make big plays. So if he's limited with a knee issue and the Saints are able to kind of tee off on him a little bit in a way that they typically would not be able to, that could change this matchup for the better, at least as far as the Saints are concerned. Now, Baker seems to think they don't play clean. Meh. Demario Davis talked about that today in the locker room. He was like, whatever. He said he hadn't even heard it. I don't know how true that is, but he didn't have anything to say about it. And the funny thing is with Demario Davis, he's like, I love trash talk, man. I want all the smoke during the game. Let's talk about it during the game. He kind of joked. He said one of the things he likes to do is when he really hits someone, when he lays somebody out, he'll stand over and be like, dang, I missed. Just to, just mess with them. Just to get in their heads. Because that's what Bake's trying to do. He's trying to get in the Saints' heads. Like, you want to play dirty? I'll play dirty. Anyway, I don't know. We'll see. I just think it's funny. Like, as a quarterback, why say that? It's fine. It's fine. We played the clip on the mini episode yesterday. If you didn't catch that, he basically said he thinks the Saints play dirty. Which, whatever. I'm over it. Anyway, that's the injury report. It's a short one for the Saints. It's a long one for the Bucs. We'll see how it plays out. We'll see if it impacts the matchup. I think it could. Will it definitely? I don't know. But I think there's a scenario where we come out of this game on Sunday being like, man, that Bucs team didn't look like the Bucs team I expected to see because so many of those players were either not there or playing banged up. So either way, that's it. Who dat? Go Saints. Gonna hit a break and come back with Brees and stuff. Stick around. And we're back on Inside Black and Gold. Jeff Nowak coming at you ahead of Week 8, getting ready for the Saints 1-6, hosting the NFC South leading Buccaneers 5-2. That's the Buccaneers squad that has won each of their last 3 games in the Caesars Superdome by quite a wide margin. They dropped 50+ last year in this matchup. It's going to be the 3rd time that Spencer Rattler has started a game at quarterback against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It is the only team that he has faced more than once. The only one. So Todd Bowles probably feels like he has a plan for the Spencer Rattler led Saints. And the only thing I can hope is that plan is based on last year's Spencer Rattler. And the Spencer Rattler we've seen this year is a little different. So can he handle it better? We'll find out. But this is the Breeze and Stuff segment. It's a chance for me to throw some sound at you based on, hey, what did some of the coordinators say? What did we hear from Drew Brees in his weekly spot on WWL radio? I'd like to let them speak for me because I'm already identifying what I want you to hear from them. So let's just let their words talk. This is what Saints offensive coordinator Doug Nussmeier said about Spencer Rattler, how he kind of handled the game and what he wants to see from him this week.
I guess it can be a fine line between aggressiveness and recklessness. How do you walk him through that so in a split second you can decide which is which?
Yeah, I think you have to take each particular snap and isolate that snap. You can't just say it's one overwhelming theme. You have to look at each snap and say, okay, here's why. If I get forced to roll to my left and I see a guy go ahead and take a big box up the sideline, well, remember, in the National Football League, these safeties are fast. So if I can't drive that ball and I got to hang it a little bit, that guy's going to come out of the middle of the field and probably make a play. So there's things like that are, for a young quarterback, they're all part of the learning process.
Yeah, and so a lot of this week for Spencer Rattler is going to be, hey, you kind of want to bury that tape to an extent. You don't want to let last week impact this week in the sense that you don't want to let one game lose you 2 games. But you also have to learn from that. You also have to learn from what happened last week, understand that what went wrong. You talk about, hey, you see a post safety and you feel like, hey, I can make a dime throw. I can make a big play. But you got to understand, hey, you're rolling out. That guy only has to worry about half the field. And if you don't put that ball on a dime, that guy's going to make a play on it. And then you turn the ball over in a situation where it really wasn't worth the risk. And suddenly the momentum is completely reversed and that's on you. Right. And so that's just decision-making, situational awareness, that sort of thing. And it's the type of thing that I think Spencer has displayed a lot and very well for the majority of this season. It's something he did not do in week 7. And he kind of admitted to it. He got a little too amped up. He wouldn't admit to why that was. I tried to get him to say it, whether it was Caleb Williams, whether it was Dennis Allen, whether it was whatever. He said, hey, I've got to be more even keeled. And can he do that this week? I hope so. I think this team has been playing better at home. I think Spencer's been playing better at home. So we'll see. Either way, that's that. One other thing to watch this week is going to be Devin Neal, the running back, taking over for Kendre Miller. I expect Velus Jones will be active. I'd like to see Velus Jones get more involved in the offense, but I'm not sure even if that happens, if it's going to be as a traditional running back or as kind of a gadget player. But I do think that you could use him as a gadget. And it was kind of annoying me that he was active and they weren't using him in the offense at all, when in the preseason you saw them incorporate some packages that really looked effective. So maybe with Kendre no longer in the mix and you're not wanting to give Devin maybe the entirety of the reps you would give Kendre, maybe you do get to incorporate Velus a little bit more, because I think he has something to offer, and he has a game-breaking type athleticism that I'm not sure the Saints have a ton of at the running back position. So we'll see how that goes. But what I always hear about Devin Neal, first thing out of everyone's mouth, is about how intelligent he is. And it's something you kind of take for granted, but it's not something you often hear about the running back position. You usually hear about elite athletes and elite traits. And while Devin Neal has some elite traits, it's the intelligence that everyone points to. So I asked Doug Nussmeier, okay, what does that look like? What is the tangible thing that comes out of that? And I thought he had a really insightful answer. So here you go. So how does that kind of appear in a running back? What does that help when you're an intelligent player?
Well, I think, it's like anything. It's hard to quantify instincts, but when you watch the tape and you watch players play, you're like, wow, how do you know to do that? Well, that was his instincts, and I think when you're watching tape, it's, because when you get into especially the evaluation process, you can see, you have hardcore answers about how big, how fast, how strong, all those things. We get those numbers. Okay, those aren't going to lie. But then when you turn on the tape, does the player play to those things? Do they have the instincts that allows them to naturally play in the flow of the game at an accelerated speed if they are a fast guy? Because some guys that run really fast on a track don't play football fast. And some guys that don't run necessarily fast on a track play football fast because they don't slow down at all. So, it's the same thing when you're talking about a guy in protection. Does he have instincts? Does he feel things? Does he see things that maybe he gets somewhere just a little bit quicker than a guy that doesn't have those type of instincts?
And so I think that he really kind of hit the nail on the head in terms of what are the biggest differences between the college game and the NFL game? Well, one of them is through the high school ranks, through the college ranks, athleticism is king. If you are the best athlete, you're going to have an inherent advantage. Like, you're going to be able to do things that other guys can't do. You're going to be able to succeed based on traits alone. So you go to Alabama as a 5-star recruit, you're like, yeah, you're going to end up being able to dominate a good portion of the competition, even in the SEC, because you're not going against NFL athletes on every down. At the NFL, you guessed it, that's exactly what you're doing. You're going up against NFL athletes with NFL speed, and everyone has those traits. Some have it at a higher level than others. But that gap in terms of who has the traits and who doesn't ceases to be what separates good players from great players. It's almost always, okay, who has the traits and who has the understanding and who thinks through the game and who plays fast, right? Like, what he said is exactly true. Like, you see all the time, guys are fast. Like, that guy's fast. Is he playing fast? Because you see sprinter speed at the combine that you just never see in the game, right? So how fast can you play? How fast can you diagnose? How fast can you understand what's happening and play? And that's what I think, if Devin Neal has some success, it's going to be about that. It's going to be about, hey, I'm ready to play because I already know what I'm looking at, and I'm not going to tell you whether he understands concepts at the NFL level. I can tell you that I've talked to him a few times and I come away thinking like, oh, it's a bright kid. Like, that's a smart kid. Like, just the way he talks about the game, just the way he talks through the game, and the way his coaches talk about him. So I'm ambitious for him. I'm excited for him in terms of how quickly they're going to be able to incorporate him into the system, how quickly they're going to be able to incorporate him in terms of how many reps he gets, how quickly they're going to be able to ramp up his involvement, and how much they're going to be able to trust him in pass protection, which is key. A lot of people have talked about is the pass pro rep where he kind of came diving across the line. And what we learned this week is it was an unscouted look. They just were not prepared for the slot blitz coming from that side of the formation. And he identified it. He got there maybe a tick late, which required him to make kind of a Superman diving block. But the fact that he saw it and got there and didn't allow his quarterback to get lit up, that's the type of thing that coaches are going to be like, all right, if we can trust you to identify an unscouted look and make the play, even if you were a tick behind where you probably wanted to be, then that allows you to open up the playbook and run your offense without having to cater it to the fact that's like, can we trust him to do this? Can we trust him to take on that assignment? Can we trust him to pick up these protections? So we'll see how it goes. Again, I'm excited about Devin Neal. I don't know what his ceiling is in terms of, we're not going to be talking about the Bijan Robinsons of the world, right? We're not going to be talking about whoever, but like a Bucky Irving. I think he could be a Bucky Irving type player, right? That type of impact. And this is going to be the first chance we get to really see it. Now, I'm not sure if he's going to go return kicks like he did last week. I think Velus Jones probably slots back in there, but we'll have to see. Either way, switching to the defensive side of the ball, there were a few things that stood out last week, and one in particular was the run defense. And this is Brandon Staley kind of talking about, okay, what went wrong?
Yeah, clearly it wasn't good enough. It was a poor performance from us in that phase, certainly, and that's where we fell short in the game. And I think the backside, a lot of those zone runs, and it was a collective effort in the front seven. That's where we fell short. And obviously anytime they can control the game that way, it's going to be hard to win. Because we played plenty well enough in the passing game and on third down and in the red area, but they were able to control the ball, and we got to get better from it.
Are you seeing more of a problem with like yards before contact or yards after contact?
Well, in this game, we weren't good enough. There were a couple runs that split, where the technique in the front and the execution of the scheme fell short. I need to coach better, and we need to play better. But this was this game was, our poorest performance in the run game. I thought we had been solid all season long, but wasn't good enough in this game.
This might be oversimplifying it, but it seemed like they were able to double team both interior tackles, and the edges were really far away. Is that a factor in terms of the width when you're trying to bend that scheme?
Yeah, I mean, our edges needed to close faster, for sure. We didn't close well enough on the backside, and that's kind of what he was alluding to. And I think, between how we started inside out, but then closing outside in, that's where, the problems came. It wasn't a tackling issue. It was just the execution of our technique and the scheme, particularly when we were in a nickel defense, So, again, need to improve.
So, yeah, play better. That's always a good start. But I do think there's going to be some schematic adjustments in terms of you need your edge players to get in and make tackles. That's kind of what he was talking about. That's what I was trying to get at when I asked him that question. It's like you need your edge players to be able to help out the interior players. And we talk a lot about 3-4-4-3. When you're in a nickel, you're basically in a 4-man front, right? Like we talk a lot about, the outside linebackers, the edge players. In a nickel defense, which is like 65-70% of what your reps are, you just have two defensive ends and 2 defensive tackles, right? And if those defensive ends are so far away that the other team is able to just double team both interior linemen and just drive them back, you're just not going to be able to make that play. So one way or the other, they're going to have to figure it out, whether it's those edge players getting off the line quicker and getting in and making that tackle, or, aligning closer so they have less ground to cover. Something's got to change. They got to figure something out. So we'll see how they adjust. I do think that's a big part of it. One more from Brandon Staley, and it's something I talked about in the film review, so I do want to bring it up. So I do want to play it. Alontae Taylor, his tackling since week 1 has been dramatically improved, right? And I was like, if you asked me after week 2, I've been like, I don't know if they're going to re-sign him because I don't know if he fits this system in terms of can he make these plays. He missed a lot of tackles weeks 1 and 2, or at least, whether they were counted statistically as a missed tackle, there were plays that he potentially could have made that just weren't made, right? And from like week 4 on, I just feel like he's been cleaning up as a tackler and just making a lot more plays, even if you haven't seen the flashy PBUs and whatever. Like, I think he's just been a really important part of this defense. So I asked Brandon, okay, so what kind of goes into that? Why do you think he's improved as a tackler? And this is what he said.
But I do think throughout the season, what you guys have been able to see is he's won a lot of tough downs in man-to-man for us, on third down. There's a bunch of ones that stand in my mind, but probably yours too. But he's been able to win a lot of the tough downs too. So I think these last 3 games, he's really, gotten into a comfort zone, into a good rhythm, and is playing well, like in all phases: perimeter force, tackling, zone defense, man-to-man defense. And he, if he plays well, like he's capable, it really gives our defense a great chance to be successful.
What do you think it is that's helped him improve as a tackler? Because, the last few weeks it has kind of stood out.
Just control. I think his pace, something that is tougher for a guy that's going outside to inside, inside to outside, is just in the slot, it's a much different pace than outside. And so just finding the right pace, you want guys in the slot to be calm. You want them to be poised because there's so much happening fast. So I think just finding that comfort zone, the pace I need to play with, because he's such a fast player. He's very, very fast. And so, but you need to kind of slow down in the slot. And I think what that's allowed him to do, especially in zone defense, is be able to trigger. You've been able to really see that. And then also when he's playing man-to-man, coverage in the slot is a lot different than outside. And I think he's finding that right comfort zone, how to play this leverage, how to match this player, how physical do I want to play with him. I think he's done a nice job of settling into a good rhythm.
Yeah, and I think that's a lot of it, right? Like when you're playing too fast, when you're kind of out over your skis, you're out of position, you're not squaring up, and you're just missing tackles, right? And I think that's probably and that's really it is what you see when you go back on tape. He doesn't look as frantic. Like he looks like he's in position, he's getting there earlier, and he's able to just make a clean hit. And I think that comes with being comfortable in the defense, right? Like it's easy to forget Alontae missed a good chunk of training camp with that groin injury or whatever it was. I heard it was a hip injury, whatever. He missed a lot of camp, a lot of install time in terms of the defense. And whether that affected him or not, it definitely didn't help. And I think as we've gone, he's really improved in that role. And in a game where you don't allow 200 yards on the ground, in a game where, you don't turn the ball over 4 times, those tackles, like being able to stop a guy for 6 yards on 3rd and 10, rather than kind of falling off and having that guy run for 5-6 more yards, get a first down, extend the drive. Like That's a winning or losing play. Like those are the type of tackles that either help you win the game or that help the other team, or they're missed tackles that help the other team win the game, right? So the more you can get out of him, and I think he is kind of showing as we go why he's going to get extended. Like I think he's getting extended. I don't think he's getting traded. I think he's an important player for this team, and hopefully he can continue to build on that. One more clip to justify the name of the segment, because I don't know, there wasn't a ton from Drew this week that justifies playing in the podcast, but he was asked, hey, how would you motivate the team? Like, what would be your sales pitch to the team this week in terms of we need them to get hyped up to go out and play as a 1-6 team going against the NFC South leading Bucs, right? Like, how do you hype them up? This is what he said.
What would be the one message you would deliver to the Saints locker room right now? I don't know, Kellen Moore's a lot. You got to win. A lot of different ways to skin a cat. I'd be surprised if I ever saw Kellen Moore yell or really give somebody the business. I'm not in those meetings. I don't know what goes on. But you've been, I guess, on a lot of different coaches, motivators, and a lot of different ways to skin a cat. All I know is you have to win. But what would be the one message you would deliver to the Saints locker room right now?
Tell you what, this would be a huge statement this week. Like, I love the fact that we're playing a great opponent. You know, I wouldn't want to be playing a team that was kind of down on their luck right now, and us just trying to squeak out a win against a team that, you know, we should beat. We're sitting here playing an opponent that a lot of people would say we shouldn't beat. You know, that is a lot better than us. You know, just based on record and kind of where they sit in the division and all that other stuff. So I think the fact we're just flying under the radar and everybody's talking bad about us, I mean, I think we should use that as fuel to our fire. And man, we got a chance this week to make a statement. And so to me, this is a statement week. And man, it starts with the prep. We're not letting anything slide in practice. And we're going to go out here ready to play our absolute best game and show people what we're all about.
There might be a little more yay rah rah to that answer in terms of if you threw him in the locker room and had him go in there. But I think that's the crux of it, right? Like, how do you turn a season around? Or at least how do you change the narrative of your season from, man, they have lost 6 of 7 games to, man, they're on the rise. Like, think about the Panthers last year. Think about what happened at the beginning of Dave Canales' run and how it was looked at by the end and how they've started this year, right? They kind of catapulted. They played tough games. They beat teams they probably weren't expected to beat. And then in year 2 under Dave Canales, they're a much more competitive group, right? They seem like they're headed in the right direction. And that's what the Saints need to turn into. They need to turn it. They need to find a signature win somewhere, right? And beating the hapless Giants, even with Jackson Dart and that kind of the spark that he's brought there, and that's not your signature win. Your signature win would be going back home, coming off of a tough loss to the Bears, and kind of putting your flag in the ground and saying, you're not coming in here and punking us again. That's happened too many times. We're going to set the tone. We're going to be the more physical team. We're going to be the team that takes care of the ball on offense. We're going to be the team that forces you to play our brand of football, right? And why not this week, right? Like, yeah, Saints shouldn't win this week. If you look at 5-2 versus 1-6, you look at Baker Mayfield finding ways to win, whatever. Who cares? Go win a game. You be the tone setters. You be the team that people start looking at and saying, hey, they don't have a great record, but they're headed in the right direction and they're playing the way you're supposed to play. Because I do think for a majority of this season, the Saints have been playing the right way. They just haven't seen the results. And until you start seeing the results, it can be tough to see the forest for the trees, right? You need to start stacking them somewhere. And I think this is the week. So we'll see. Either way, that's Drew / my sales pitch. And that's going to wrap up that segment. Again, Jeff Nowak, Inside Black and Gold, getting ready for Week 8. Saints hosting the Bucs. Bucs are 5-2, leading the NFC South. Saints are 1-6, just trying to find their way. We'll see how it goes. Either way, we're going to hit a break, come back, bring on James Yarcho, host of Locked on Bucs. Also, Steve Geller as we close out this show. We're going to talk a lot about the injuries, find out what to expect from Tampa Bay. Right? Yeah. Good, right? And then we're going to close out the show with X Factors. Who dat? Make sure to subscribe. Thanks for being here. Stick around. And we are back on Inside Black and Gold, getting you ready for week 8. Almost lost track there. Saints 1-6 hosting the Bucs. He always seems to find a way to win, Bucs, although that wasn't the case on Monday. 5-2. It's been kind of a reverse splits series between these teams over the years. Not so much last year, but the home team always seems to lose, or at least tries to lose. We're going to get into it. We're going to bring in James Yarcho, host of Locked On Bucs. You can follow him over on Twitter at JYarcho. That's actually YARCHO_Bucs. And we're going to get into it. We found out yesterday why Baker Mayfield hates the Saints so much, which is, always going to be a fun conversation. But James, how are things going in Bucs land? It feels like the Bucs are in the scenario that the Saints felt they were in during the Drew Brees era a little bit, in terms of no one else seems to want to compete with them in the division. But how you feeling, man?
Yeah, it's been a rough week. Obviously, Baker picked the worst time possible to have his worst performance as a Buccaneer on Monday night. And then you compound that with losing Mike Evans for the vast majority of the regular season. It ends his 1,000-yard streak, takes away his opportunity to break Jerry Rice's record. So there's been some somber moods across Bucs Nation since Monday. But this is a perfect opportunity for them to try to bounce back, get a big divisional win before they head into the bye and start getting some of these players healthy and back on the field. Yeah,
and I just to start here, it's not often you see an injury report that deserves like a 2-page, like front and back, breakdown. 17 players listed, and that doesn't even include Mike Evans, who had already been sent to injured reserve. So I guess the question is, just how concerned are you with all of these injuries? Because when you look at a team that's listing almost a third of its roster on the injury report, you'd be like, well, that should be concerning. But it just seems like the Bucs keep finding ways to win regardless. At a certain point, it's got to start affecting you.
Yeah, I mean, it's par for the course this year. And I think the vast majority of those guys that appeared on the injury report will end up playing. Chris Godwin, Bucky Irving, Hassan Reddick. It doesn't, Godwin and Bucky have already been ruled out. It does not sound like Hassan Reddick will be playing. But for the rest of those guys, Baker, Ibuka, Antoine Winfield Jr., Levante David, those guys will be on the field and they'll be playing. So it's not time to hit the panic alarm yet, but this is a team that has dealt with a ton of major injuries, not just to starters, but to key players. They started the first 3 weeks of the season by playing 0 offensive linemen in their regular starting spot. Wow. And you're still missing the right side of your offensive line with Cody Mauch out for the season. Luke Gedeke not expected back until after the bye. You've had Zion McCollum miss games. Jamel Dean has missed games. Benjamin Morrison has missed games. But they just continue to find ways to get the job done, which I think is another reason that Monday was such a gut punch, because this team has found ways to win. And the offense went out there and just laid a huge egg against a secondary that was made up of used car salesmen and concession workers.
What's going on with one of our favorite former quarterbacks over here, Teddy Bridgewater? I've never seen someone on an injury report with teeth.
As somebody who's gone through some dental issues of his own, I fully respect the fact that he's like, nah, like I'm not practicing. Like, tooth pain is the worst. I'd rather break my leg than have tooth pain. So I don't know the specifics of Teddy's injury, but that kind of stuff is not fun at all. So hopefully it's not a situation where he's inactive and then all of a sudden they would need a backup quarterback, but definitely a first on the injury report that I've seen in my time doing this.
Yeah, that is a weird one. It's the injuries are the story for the Bucs, and it's weird because it hasn't become something we talked about a ton. But like the wide receiver position, obviously Ibuka, he's dealing with a hamstring injury. Didn't seem to limit him. It's a short week, so it's obviously something to watch. But I fully expect him to be out there. He looked fine against the Lions. But past that, what have been your thoughts? Tez Johnson, Sterling Shepard, who I grew up a Giants fan, so I know Sterling Shepard really well. He's a really good player. Another guy who dealt with injuries throughout his career. Otherwise, I think he would be talked about as a much different type of player. How has that wide receiver core been to this stage?
I've been impressed, honestly. And, Jalen McMillan is a guy that hasn't even been on the field. Teddy Bridgewater threw a hospital ball to him and he ended up in a neck brace. So he's not expected back until December. But Sterling Shepard has quietly been incredibly effective. And then Tez Johnson has really stepped up as of late. He's got back-to-back weeks with a touchdown. He has 12 targets over the last 2 games. He had 7 total targets in his first 4 games combined. So he's a guy that is starting to get a little bit more involved in the offense. And much like his Oregon teammate Bucky Irving, if you get the ball in his hands, he can make some magic happen. So I like that they're starting to implement his usage a little bit more. Cam Johnson has been solid when called upon, which was a big surprise to me. He was one of the guys that I had marked as someone that wouldn't make the 53-man roster when I did my prediction. So he has been a very pleasant surprise. You still have Cade Otton out there. You still have a couple of running backs in Rachaad White and Sean Tucker that can be effective out of the backfield. But as far as the wide receivers go, I mean, this is a preview of the future for Bucs fans and for Saints fans for what the wide receiver core of the future for the Buccaneers will look like, with Emeka Egbuka being a slam dunk wide receiver 1 in this league.
Any chance Vita Vea is banged up? Because no Eric McCoy for the Saints. I am deathly afraid what's going to happen in the trenches this game.
Yeah, no, Vita's going to be out there. That was something that Ross Jackson and I talked about, and I know your viewers and listeners know Ross very well.
Yeah.
That was a big storyline when we previewed this game was, Vita Vea versus whoever that backup center is going to be. And to his credit, 5th-round pick Elijah Roberts, who has stepped in for Kalijah Kancey, who's out for the year, he has started to emerge over the last couple of weeks. So that's even more pressure on the interior of the Saints offensive line with those two coming at you. It doesn't make up for the loss of Hassan Reddick, but Yaya Diaby has emerged over the last couple of weeks. So that's going to be a scary matchup for Saints fans, having Vita and Elijah Roberts going after whoever they end up naming as the backup center.
Yeah, it's wild. It's not just the injury report. It's also, the injured reserve list is wild for the Bucs.
Yeah.
Talking Mike Evans, Luke Gedeke, Kalijah Kancey, Cody Mock, Jalen McMillian. Like these are players who aren't even on these 17-man injury report that the Bucs are without. But, so let's just stick on the defense. One stat that stood out to me when I was going through and kind of assessing, okay, what are you good at? What are you bad at? Obviously, the Bucs have been really effective against the run. I think 99 yards allowed a game, but where they haven't been effective is yards after catch. They've allowed 990 yards after catch to this point in the season. It's the second most, behind only the Bengals. And so this is why I find these interviews very, very useful, because I'm going to ask, is that a real stat? Is that a mirage based on a few games? Or is this team just really bad at tackling the catch?
They're really bad at tackling running backs after the catch. And that's where it really boils down. I mean, first drive of the season, Bijan Robinson took a short little dump off 50 yards to the house. You saw it again Monday night. Jahmyr Gibbs had a couple of chunk plays. I think at one point he had like 3 receptions for 69 yards or something obscene. So where this team has really, really struggled is against pass catching backs. Christian McCaffrey, he had a solid day catching the football. So what they can do as a run defense, they cannot seem to make up for against those running backs. And part of it, I hate to say it, is Levante David getting older. Father Time is undefeated. He's about a half step slower than what we've been used to over the course of the last 12, 13 years of him playing. And then Servassier Dennis, he has gotten better in coverage, but that Jahmyr Gibbs huge chunk play on their opening drive, Servassier Dennis slips and falls on the turf. There's nobody else near Jahmyr Gibbs, and no one on the secondary is going to be able to catch him, as we saw in his 78-yard touchdown. So there have been some moments where receivers have been able to get big chunk plays after the catch, but it's primarily been the running backs.
The Saints have had issues, special teams, kicker this year. Blake Grupe has had his struggles from all kinds of distances. I know that things haven't been great either on the Buccaneers side with Chase McLaughlin. Has he gotten any better, or is he still kind of, what is it, like the 30 to 50 range is where he's been soft?
He had a rough start to the season. I think since week 2, he's missed 1 field goal. I could be wrong on that, but he really started to step up. It was kind of weird the way the Buccaneers special teams have struggled this year. The first couple of weeks, it was Chase McLaughlin in the kicking game. Then it was kick coverage. The Seattle's, I think, average starting field position was near the 40-yard line because they couldn't stop anybody on kickoffs. Then it was Riley Dixon and the punting game. He was shanking punts. They were getting blocked and returned for touchdowns. It was a gigantic mess. So the Bucs seem to pick one facet of special teams to be really, really bad in each and every week. But McLaughlin, he's really bounced back. He's done really well. Set the NFL record for the longest field goal in history outdoors against the Eagles back in week 4. He's really started to be himself again, which was a sigh of relief for a lot of Bucs fans and probably the Bucs themselves. They didn't have to bring in a bunch of kickers and send McLaughlin on his way.
Yeah, it's funny because I don't pay attention to the other team's kickers. All I remember is seeing McLaughlin knock through that 65-yarder, and I'm like, he must be having a good season. But it's sometimes you forget that there's other kicks that you're supposed to make too. My last question is a run game. No Bucky Irving. It seems like it's been the Rachaad White show, just in terms of filling in. It looks like Josh Williams is hurt. I don't know if he's going to play, but it's just a weird situation because the Saints remember Sean Tucker as like the best running back they've ever faced, because in that game he had 14 carries for 136 yards and a touchdown. I don't think he's ever had more than 47 yards in any other game, period. I didn't even know Sean Tucker's name prior to that game, and he hasn't done a ton after that to make me like, oh, that's the Sean Tucker, the star. Anyway, do you expect it to be primarily Rachaad White, or if you're Todd Bowles, how do you not say like, why don't we give Sean some chances, see if it's just a Superdome magic thing?
Yeah, I mean, I do expect it to be primarily Rachaad, and he's done a decent job in Bucky's absence. But of course, he's always been more effective as a pass blocker and a pass catcher than he has a pure runner. Now, Sean Tucker had some snaps against the Lions, had some snaps against the San Francisco 49ers, not to the level that Rachaad would with Bucky Irving in the game, but I expect him to certainly get some work. I think the Bucs abandoned the run game way too early against Detroit, and that really limited the opportunities for Sean Tucker to be a factor in that game. So yeah, don't forget about Sean. He will see the field on more than just a couple of occasions on Sunday against the Saints.
All right. Well, I mean, so I guess just parting thoughts. What's your confidence level going into this game? Because I know Saints fans are not particularly confident. But I mean, you've watched this team, you've coming off a loss. Like, how do you think they'll bounce back? Like, do you think this is a team that walks into the Dome this year and keeps that run going?
I lean towards the Bucs are going to bounce back and win this game. But there is that other part of me that's like, well, in the Todd Bowles era, they always seem to go on like a 4-game losing streak. And I don't expect them to hang 50 on the Saints like they did last year in New Orleans. I also don't expect them to give up 27 points in one quarter either. But, it's a divisional game, and those are always tougher, than what the paper matchup would tell us. So I would expect a little bit of a bounce back from Spencer Rattler compared to what he did against Chicago. I would expect a big bounce back from Baker Mayfield compared to what he did against Detroit. So it's not going to be an easy game. It's probably going to be stressful for Bucs fans, as pretty much every other game this season has been. But I do expect the Bucs to leave with a win and before they head into their bye week.
All right. Well, we'll have to wait and see. James Yarcho, host of Locked on Bucs. You can check him out on X at JYarcho. That's YARCHO_BUCS for Bucs. Thanks so much, man. I really appreciate it. Great insight.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate you.
Thanks again, James Yarcho, for coming on. Follow him on X at JYarcho_Bucs. If you want to tell him he's wrong or tell him he's right, even, I don't know, go check out his work. He's a lot of informative stuff. And I again, one of the reasons I really value those interviews is because I'll see these stats and I'm like, man, 990 yak yards. That's crazy. But it does make sense because when I watched the most of that Monday night game, because just like the week before, it's a really nice scouting element when I can just sit down on a Monday night and watch the team that you're going to play the next week, rather than having to go back and do it anyway instead of when I wanted to watch that Monday night game anyway. And yeah, as someone who had Jahmyr Gibbs in fantasy, I really did appreciate that. And it was exactly what happened. Is I don't think the receivers necessarily had a ton of catch and run, but Jahmyr Gibbs, it seemed like every time he caught the ball, he was getting 15, 20, 25, 30 yards. So that adds up fast. And so, hey, okay, can the Saints take advantage of that, right? If that is an actual problem of their defense, can they get Alvin Kamara in space? Because that's what's been bugging me about Alvin. Not necessarily has he lost a step. It's like, I need to use Alvin in advantageous ways, and it's been bugging me for years. And I don't know, is this something that, they did throw to him once and against the Seahawks, and he didn't catch it. And I don't know, he's had a couple drops, and that's on Alvin. But that's always been like what makes Alvin Kamara such a weapon is not just that he's a running back, that he's a pass catching threat. And I just don't feel like we've gotten that out of him. So maybe this is the matchup where you can finally run a few screens or just get him the ball out of the backfield in ways that can affect the pressure.
Definitely talk about it. The Saints' biggest playmaker right now has just been really kind of meh this year, and we need Alvin to be his special self for sure.
There's so many injuries. If the Saints had that level of injuries, we would be like, they might lose by 50. Like the Saints have injuries too, obviously not having Eric McCoy, not having Kendre Miller, but like the Bucs have those types of injuries all over the place. Like
their injury report feels like the Saints last year.
And even like I mentioned, like not just the injury report, also the guys on IR.
Already on IR, right?
Right. Like they got first round picks and all-time great receivers just hanging out on injured reserve. And they still find ways to win games, but at a certain point, that's got to affect you. And like they're a good enough team that they have the quarterback that can win games, but like,
oh darn! I know
game,
Saints fans are heartbroken. We won't see Mike Evans' punk ass.
Yeah, the last time the Saints see Mike Evans is that time where he got here's a reception for your record, and we can last year, which is like, sure, yeah, okay, that means something to you. That's how you're gonna get it, all right. But no, I mean, if the Saints find a way to win this game, that's gonna be the story. Is the Bucs have too many injuries to win. And I'm not going to be able to disagree with it because that level of injury should affect you in a negative way. And again, if the Saints had an injury report that long, we wouldn't even be talking about how can they win. We'd be talking about how can they cover the spread, which is bound to be like 15 points. So
I'm surprised it's not more than it is for the Buccaneers in this matchup.
What is the line?
I think it's 3.5.
Yeah, 3.5 dogs at home is a significant number, but I think that's probably representative of that. You look at a team without its top wide receiver, without its top running back, without key offensive linemen, without key defensive players. Yancey is a big absence for them, but he hasn't been there for a while.
Surprisingly, Jeff, it opened at 5.5 and is down to 3.5.
No, I mean, I think a lot of times you'll see it, like you'll see, okay, this is probably a field goal game, right? I doubt it gets inside of 3. But anytime when you're looking at it and you're saying, yeah, I think the Saints can keep it within a field goal, right? So
I'm just hoping for some post Eric McCoy magic because I'm worried.
Some post McCoy, like is that his rapper name, Post McCoy?
Post McCoy, yeah. Just we saw things without the center last year. It wasn't pretty.
Yeah. They do have a better option at least now than they had last year because I think Luke Warner, in terms of like they brought him in because you were like, if this happens, we need a better candidate than who. It wasn't McGovern initially, right? Oh, it was Shane Lemieux, who had never played center in his life and actually played pretty well against the Falcons. Then he got hurt, and then they had to find a guy off the scrap heap. Quite literally, in terms of he was on the Jets practice squad, and they signed Connor McGovern, who isn't even the good Connor McGovern. There's 2 Connor McGoverns, both play center. One is actually a guy that's rostered, and the other one was on the Jets practice squad. And they got that Connor McGovern spelled the same way. And he played admirably, considering he showed up midweek and had to play. And they tried Lucas Patrick. That was the other guy they tried, and that didn't work. So at the very least now, you have a guy that you were like, yeah, okay, he's got some experience. We'll have him here. We'll work him into the system. So by this point, he's ready.
I was surprised to hear Cesar Ruiz name mentioned as a possibility, but I guess they were just thinking of guys who were at least in-house that are options.
It always, I mean, I know it was a conversation for people on the outside, but I don't think it was really ever that much of a debate in terms of you're going to start Luke and you're going to keep everyone else in the same spot, right, and maybe change some assignments and how communication is handled. But like people really like Torricelli Simpkins, and I understand why. But I need him to develop as a guard. I don't need to change his position. He struggled in pass protection as a guard. So I don't want to put him in position where he's now in a different situation. The question's going to be who's your backup center right now, right? Because they didn't sign one. Now, they might sign a guy later in the week, but they didn't. They had a roster spot open. They gave it to Jonathan Ridgway, and they signed Velus Jones, the running back, to the active roster and signed a running back to the practice squad. So you don't really have a backup center other than, and I think that's why he mentioned these two guys in the sense that if Luke Fortner gets hurt, who goes in then? And that I genuinely don't know. It would
I think
probably
you do look to Torricelli Simpkins.
Probably, just because you can at least have him getting reps while Caesar is still focusing on guard.
Right.
But and it really depends on what's happening. If who's getting those reps this week? Because if it is a situation where Caesar's sliding over and Simpkins is taking over at guard, we'll find out if it ever comes to that point. But that's the bigger question. Like, I always was pretty confident it'd be Luke Fortner, but now
So I guess if you do Ruiz, then do you put Radins at guard?
that's a good point. It probably would be Radins over Simpkins.
I don't know.
But either way, it's not where you want to be. So hopefully
It's a whole mess you don't want to contend with.
Hopefully we never learn the answer to that question, right? Because even if we get it right, we won't be happy about the results.
Right, correct.
But all right, let's wrap up that segment. Thanks again to James Yarcho for coming on. We're going to hit a break, come back, and finish out the show with our X factors. What can swing the matchup? What are we looking at? Who dat? Go Saints. Throw up the X. R.I.P. Des Bryant. He's still alive, but his Saints career had died after 24 hours. So throw up the X for Des.
You had me. I was like, wait a minute, Des Bryant died?
No. Des is still out there. But I'll never forget that. That was a wild 24 hours, man.
It was fun.
Wild. Loved it. Can't wait. All right, we'll be right back.
Who dat?
And we are back on Inside Black and Gold, getting you ready for Week 8. Saints 1-6, hosting the Bucs 5-2. Second consecutive week they're facing a team coming off Monday Night Football. It's also a week where they are facing a team that has 17 names in its injury report, which is a lot. And so we're going to get into it. Jeff Nowak, Steve Geller, finishing out the episode as we do with X factors. How can the Saints win this matchup? And I don't know about you, this is going to be a game where people talk about it like the Saints don't have a chance. I don't think this is that game. I really don't. I don't think this is the type of game that you go into when you feel like, the Saints are going to go in here and get blown out. I don't. Are the Saints going to win it? Probably not, because I think the Bucs have that gene in them that they go win games, and the Saints don't have that gene in them. They might be winning this game in the fourth quarter like the Giants were against the Broncos and, blow it. But I don't know. What is your expectation for this game? We'll get to X factors in a second. I just can't bring myself to look at the Bucs with all their injuries and all their missing pieces and say they're going to just walk in there and roll over the Saints. I don't think that's what's going to happen.
My biggest concern right now is the fact you're going into a matchup where we've seen this offense struggling the entire season, and you've lost your biggest vital key piece in center, Eric McCoy. So I'm just wondering how the whole operation with the entire O-line is going to operate, and then how the problems trickle down from there. So I'm definitely concerned here. I don't think it's a non-winnable game because, like you mentioned, there's a slew of injuries for this Buccaneers squad. But that trait, like you mentioned, that ability to find the way to win, they've been damn good at that, although they got housed last week by the Lions.
Yeah, I think the reason I don't see, I think it's going to be a close game because I think it's going to be a low-scoring game, right? I think that it's going to look a lot more like the 49ers game where, it's there's just a lot of bad offense, and then whoever finds the good offense fast enough. I just think if it's a one-score game in the fourth quarter, you're probably going to lose, right? That's how you look at a team that has a quarterback that understands how to go and win games. But let's get into the X factor. So let's start with the Saints defense against the Bucs offense, because we already, we talked to Eric McCoy and whatnot. We're going to have plenty on that. But what about the Saints defense? And keep in mind, this is a team coming off a performance where they allowed 222 rushing yards, right? They got one sack. They kind of got run ragged by Caleb Williams to an extent, but they did cover well. So, what are your X factors going into this game against a team that I think is similar with Baker and how he moves around?
Yeah, the thing with me is like you would think right away, it's like, please stop the run. I thought they would do a hell of a lot better against the Chicago Bears. But for this game, you look at the Buccaneers' strength, and it's definitely Baker in that passing game. So I'm looking at the secondary in this one. Can you cover whoever's at wide receiver for the Buccaneers right now? We know no Mike Evans, no Chris Godwin, but they've had some guys still being productive there, and they have a tight end too that kind of worries you having to defend. But overall, for me, it's just getting the pressure to make Baker uncomfortable, and the secondary being able to cover in against whoever's at wide receiver, because the Bucs run game really doesn't scare me any. But I'm saying that, and watch, whatever they do have going for them will end up having career days against the Saints.
Yeah, I think what concerned me about watching that game last week was not necessarily it wasn't the talent level. It was the scheme that was kind of taken advantage of, which the Saints have really kind of leaned into these like wide 9 rushing techniques. And so what it does is it puts the edge rushers very far away from the center, right? And that's great when you're rushing the passer. It's a problem when the other team is running, because what they were able to do is double team both interior linemen. And when you're in nickel, you're basically playing a 4-3. Like, yeah, it's a 3-4 defense, but in nickel, you're basically playing 4 down linemen. So like in that instance, you have 5 offensive linemen, 4 defensive linemen. If you're not bringing an extra body, they can just double team both interior linemen. And, if you had like an Aaron Donald who could kind of split that, or really, if you have Devon Gotcha who can kind of hold his ground, that's great. But when you're talking about mixed down situations, which is where the Bears really took the Saints to task, like in on downs where you can either run or pass, and you have Brian Brzee, Nathan Shepard, who aren't your biggest defensive tackles, they're just getting driven off the line, and you're kind of hoping that your edge rushers, who are basically free, they might have a tight end chipping them or a running back coming after them, but you can run through those guys. They're betting that, hey, we have our fast running back. We have DeAndre Swift. He's going to get through that line of scrimmage before those edge rushers can close that gap. And that's what created a lot of those big runs. And so that's a scheme thing. And that's a Brandon Staley fix that has to happen, which is on those mixed downs, you just cannot align that far away from the line of scrimmage. Because if you come down and you get into more of kind of a 5 technique, like an outside technique, and you still have that outside rush, you at least are close enough that if they're going to try to double team both interior linemen, you're right there. You're Chase Young. You're very athletic. You get off the line, you can make that tackle, and they can't do that. But if you're going to set up that far away, you're just not going to have a chance. So I think that's going to be a philosophical change they have to make. Because if I'm the Bucs, I'm like, I'm going to do the same shit. Right? Like, why am I getting creative here? Like, I can do the same thing if they're going to continue to do that. Yeah. So, it's a situation where, when they're in and long situations, right? You're in 2nd and long, 3rd and long. You can't really do that. But you're talking about, 2nd and 4, right? Where you have to defend the run and the pass. 3rd and 2, where you have to defend the run and the pass. It's a much more difficult scenario. So I think that's my X factor is, okay, how does the Saints adjust to that? And then just beyond that, like the Bucs really haven't been good at separating this year. 3.3 average yards of separation per game, right? So that's 30th in the NFL. Abuka reminds me a lot of Olave, in that he does seem to be kind of that smooth, mover separator who never has to work too hard. Like he doesn't ever look like he's, revved up more than like second gear but he is, and he's moving, and he's just a smooth player. All those Ohio State players, man, they're just smooth. You watch him move around and you're like, damn. But no, I agree with you. And I think just on top of that, like, so you're going to cover, you have to account for Baker. One thing that I appreciated last week is that Caleb Williams, they didn't get to him a ton, but you watch that game back and you watch the All-22 because you can't really see it in the broadcast. All you see is, Caleb doing his like dodgeball thing where I'm going this way. No, I'm going that way. And then you're just like, I guess there's no one open because he's not throwing the ball. You wonder if, okay, is he missing guys or are there's actually nobody open? And you go back and you watch those reps, there was like 3 or 4 of them. There was nobody open. Like the Saints defenders, they call it plaster, right? They just kind of stick to an offensive player and don't let them get free because they're just trying to juke you. They're trying to go one way, like get you moving and then go the other. If you stumble and they have a big play, like that's what Caleb is extending to try to find. And that's what Baker does a lot of. He will scramble a lot more than Caleb did. And I think Caleb needs to scramble more. Like that's a big part of his game that for whatever reason he doesn't take advantage of. When you're extending for 30 seconds, like there's no one there. You don't just throw it away. Take 5 yards. He doesn't seem to want to do that. Baker will do that. And Baker in the big moments when it's like 3rd and 8 and he can't find anyone, he's going to go get that first down. So you have to both plaster, but with Baker more so than Caleb, you have to also account for him taking off. Now, I do wonder if that knee injury he's dealing with is going to be a factor. And if so, this could be a Chase Young game. But that's kind of all encompassing.
You talking Baker's knee issue?
Yeah. Did you watch? Were you able to catch the Lions Bucs game?
I didn't see the end.
He was getting teed off on.
Yeah.
Like all day. And one of the things that was clear to me by the end of that game, he wasn't moving the way you're used to seeing Baker Mayfield move. I think that was a big part of why they weren't able to finish off some of those drives to make that into a closer game because, he was just kind of pocket bound. And who knows how much that's going to impact him this week. It's a short week for a quarterback who's dealing with a knee injury. So if his mobility is limited, which is very much a possibility, that could be something that helps the Saints maybe pick up that sack total. But we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm sure Baker's comments too about hating the Saints will get back to them and hopefully fuel that pass rush even more.
You know what bugs me about Baker, and this is just like when people talk about him beating the odds. And I mean, you mean the number 1 overall pick? The guy who went number 1 overall in the NFL draft? He's not beating the odds. He already lost to the odds.
Right, he's a reclamation project.
Right. Like he didn't beat any odds. Like he already had the best odds. like just because he lost to the odds the first time doesn't mean he's now beating them. It means that they gave him a chance and he delivered on it. But like we're talking about him like he's a 7th. Like Tom Brady beat the odds because
Correct, right.
When you're a 6th round pick, you never get a chance. Like if Spencer Rattler takes over this job and never gives it back, he beat the odds because the odds are against him. You're the number 1 overall pick. You failed. That doesn't mean just because you came back and succeeded doesn't mean you beat the odds. It means that you survived failure. But I hear that all the time. Like, oh, he beat the odds. What an underdog story. He's the number 1 pick in the draft. There's no such thing as an underdog story when you are the number 1 pick in the draft. I don't care how long ago that was. You're not the underdog here. But that's what people are talking about him like now.
I guess because he got tossed aside as a former 1st overall pick.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's not beating odds.
And that was his own fault. Like he's more mature now. That like he's able to lead a room now in a way he wasn't before. That's not like finally they figured it out. No, he figured it out that he needed to be a different version of himself.
And I like Baker, but I didn't like him coming out saying the Saints are basically dirty.
Yeah, well, and also go get the hell out. But you weren't here during the real chippy days. Like you weren't here during the Marshawn Lattimore, Mike Evans blood feud where right. Marshawn was getting ear-holed from the sideline when he wasn't looking. Like, really? Now you're coming into it late in the game and you're like, oh, it's not a way. Go to hell. Anyway, have Mike Evans account for whether the Saints are dirty or not. How about that?
I thought it was funny. It just adds fuel to the fire for this divisional matchup, and also give that poke the bear on Saints fans too.
Yeah, and it's like Baker, you're unlikable too. Like, just wait until you have a bad stretch of games.
Oh yeah,
and we'll be able to talk about the Baker stuff. Anyway, moving on. Let's get to the other side of the ball. That's just like, dude, like at least like account for the fact that you weren't here when all this started. No, the dirty team. Get the hell out. Get the hell out. It's like Russ.
That's fine. Yeah, I don't have a problem saying he hates the Saints. He should. It's a division rival. But when he came out saying, "Oh, the play was dirty at times," and I'm like,
they hit me hard,
man.
Oh man, they hit me so hard. Oh,
Right.
poor baby.
Right.
Then we're not allowed to do that in the NFL anymore. I forgot. Hit the quarterback. What a clown. Anyway, moving on. I just Mike Evans isn't going to be out there. I can't bring that to this game with me, but I still feel it in my soul. Okay. Saints offense. And I think the Saints offense is where the real X factors are. Like, we can talk about the defense all we want. If the offense comes out against a very similar defense from last week and does not learn its lessons, and that has a lot to do with Spencer Rattler, it has a lot to do with the offensive line and the run game, then it's going to be a similar game, right? So what are your X factors for the Saints offense in this one?
I'm kind of like in waiting mode here. I want to see Kamara be Kamara, and I don't know if the ankle injury is kind of being part of the problem for him right now, but he's just not looking like the same dude, and I don't think that the offensive line has been that terrible. I know there's issues up front, but there's just been nothing able to get going with him in the run or the pass game for that matter.
Yeah, here's a step for you. Alvin Kamara has generated negative 71 rushing yards over expected this season. That's the second fewest among all running backs in the NFL.
Negative 71?
Negative 71. So he has 71 fewer rushing yards than expected. He's also forced a 19.1% missed tackle rate, which is his lowest since 2018 and the ninth lowest among running backs with at least 50 carries. So he's not making people miss, right? And that's what made Kendre so valuable is he was. Correct. And so we'll have to see if Devin Neal can do that. I think Devin Neal is going to be a good player in a lot of ways. And I don't know if that's going to be this week. I don't know what his role is going to be this week. I don't think it's going to be the type of tandem you saw with Alvin and Kendre, right? I think it was getting closer to like 60-40 Alvin Kendre, maybe even 55-45. With Devin, I think it's going to be like 70-30. But I don't want it to be like 90-10 or 80-20. Like, I need to get Devin Neal some real reps. And those don't need to be carries. I need him to, but I think the rep count needs to be there. Like, I need to be able to get Alvin off the field. And I don't know. It's tough to say with Alvin because he's not like an explosive player in the sense that, he's always going his top speed. Like, he's a player that when he sees the hole, he gets through it. When there's no hole, he's not always a player that can drag guys with him. So yeah, we'll see. I think he's a veteran and you need him, but he hasn't been a difference maker to this point. Definitely not against the Bears.
That alone, I mean, I mentioned Alvin because you say playmakers, and you need your playmakers in big games, a division game. But I'll also throw in, you mentioned with the running back Devin Neal needing to step up. What's up with Taysom? I'm glad he's back and all, but he's another dude that just looks old now, and I don't know if that's being too critical of him or the O-line's, not doing their job for him either.
Well, the big tackle for loss in that game, one of the issues is against the Bears, Dennis Allen knows exactly what to do to Taysom Hill, right? Like of any defense that's going to go against Taysom Hill, no one has a more kind of intimate understanding of how to defend it than the guy who dealt with it in every training camp practice for the last 6 years. You know what I mean? And I just so it's tough, but like you saw how they defended him in that game and they just got off the line and blocked him. Like, you tried to chip him with Devon Vele on that kind of outside zone or whatever it was, kind of that sweep. And I think it was Montez Sweat. He just got off the line and into the backfield faster than your wide receiver could even possibly. Like, it wasn't even a bad play by Vele. He just physically couldn't get to him because the defender knew that Taysom is back there. I'm just flying upfield. Like, I'm not even going to consider that, he might pass it. I'm not even going to consider that, he might hand it off because he's not going to. Like, you can do this. You can do the play action all you want. If you only hand it off once every 20 times, why would a defender ever take even a half step to consider it? So I think that's part of it. But no, he doesn't look 100%. Like, I think he's still working his way back. He's still really useful in those short yardage situations, but I don't know how effective he's going to be as a runner in those like 1st and 10, 2nd and 5. I do think you probably need to use him as a passer, right? Like, I think if you do that a couple times, it changes the narrative of like, how do we defend him?
Yeah.
And you have done it once, but only once was it even on, like, looked like it was on the table. So no, I agree with that. There's a few interesting stats for the run game when you look at the Bucs. And one is that, okay, so they invest a lot of bodies to stop the run. They've been very good at stopping the run, but they also invest a lot of bodies. They have a 35.8% stacked box percentage, which means more than a third of the time they're devoting 8 bodies to the run game. They've also been tackling really well. They're 3rd in the NFL at yards before contact allowed. They're 31st in the NFL at yards after contact allowed. So that means that they're putting a lot of bodies at the line of scrimmage. They're not always winning in the front, but they are tackling once it gets past the front. So how can the Saints take advantage of that? That's going to be a big question. But my X factor is, hey, okay, this is the first time all year that Spencer Rattler is facing a team that's played him before. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And he's played the Bucs 3 times. Todd Bowles is facing Spencer Rattler for the 3rd time. No other team the Saints have faced Spencer Rattler even twice. This is going to be his 3rd division game. It'll be a 3rd game against the Bucs. And if you look at last week and you kind of draw a parallel between, hey, the only other defensive coordinator in the NFL that had as intimate of a knowledge as Todd Bowles did of how Spencer Rattler is going to operate as a starting quarterback was Dennis Allen. And I think a lot of that game can be ascribed to DA knew exactly how to attack a Spencer Rattler-led offense. Well, Todd Bowles is probably feeling the same way. Like last year, it was a lot of blitzes. The Bucs love to send blitzes. I think their blitz rate is 34.1%. That's number 6 in the league. They have 111 quarterback pressures. That's 5th in the league. Their pressure rate is even better at 41%, which I believe is 2nd or 3rd in the NFL. So they devote a lot of bodies to stop the run. They send extra bodies against the pass. And so you have to be able to hit over the top. And if you can hit big plays over the top, I think you give yourself a chance. If you kind of get gun shy because you threw all the interceptions last week and you just turn down those shot plays and try to just do dink and dunk underneath, I think you're going to lose the game. So that's my X factor is, can Spencer stay confident and get the ball downfield, or is he just shell shocked and continues to, not see the blitz? And if that happens, then I think we're going to be seeing Tyler Shuck before too long.
That's, I think, the major question for fans and I guess folks around the NFL at this point. You got a squad that's 1-6 right now. Depending on what happens this week, who knows? But at what point does the coaching staff say we need to see what the 2nd round pick has?
I don't think it's going to be this week, but
no, right.
Like this is an important week for Spencer to bounce back, right? Like they're going to, and we heard Mickey Loomis last night or Monday on WWL, and he's like, I'm anxious to see how he responds and how we respond around him. Well, like, okay, how do you do that, right? This team has played better at home than they have on the road, and that's not a bad trait to have. Like I'll settle for being a good home team before I worry about being a good road team. That playing well at home needs to happen first. And so you're coming home, you're facing a team with a lot of injuries. They're still going to get after you. Can you come back and look like the quarterback we saw the first or most of the first 6 weeks, with Seattle notwithstanding? Or is that who you are? And do you have teams started to figure you out? And do you kind of go into a shell? Because if that's the answer, then yeah, I think that the Spencer Rattler run does end pretty quickly. And there's a chance that at the end of this game, you end up in garbage time and you do see the young quarterback, and hey, maybe he plays really well, and that's the impetus to make that change. One way or another, it's on Spencer. He either plays well or he doesn't.
I feel like if they do start to bring him in like garbage time, that's a signal. It's coming.
No, they've done it once. They did it in Seattle, and that wasn't a signal then. But we are further down the line now. Right. You're 1-6, 1-7. You're already feeling like the season's over. You have the GM coming out and be like, we knew going in this was going to be a development year. So I think that tells you a lot about where they are. And this is going to be a game, like this is the type of game that can break something, right? Like you go out to Chicago, you're on the road. It's a difficult environment. Like you lose, you're probably supposed to lose. Your old defensive coordinator had a great plan for you. He got after it. Like, you can be like, okay, just they got away from us. We get it. That's not going to be the game that, like, that snaps it. But this type of game, if the Bucs come in here and hang 50 again, like, that's the type of thing that can change a lot in a hurry. Just like going out to Carolina last year in Week 9 and losing to them was what really kind of pushed the Dennis Allen era over the edge. So,
how depleted they are. Yeah, if they hang 50, Jeff, we're in real big trouble.
well, we're in big trouble regardless. But
yeah,
I understand what you're saying. But all right, let's wrap up this episode. Again, Saints hosting the Bucs on Sunday. Jeff Nowak, Steve Geller. We're going to be hosting the pregame show starting at, it's an afternoon game. The first one all year at the Caesars Superdome. So what time does the pregame show even start? 11?
11 a.m., yeah.
All right, so we'll be hosting First Take starting at 11.
Not 8, thankfully.
Running to 1. I don't even know how my whole Sunday is going to be messed up with that weird schedule, but we'll get through it. We'll get through it. I'm excited about it.
I'll be properly caffeinated already. I won't have to be bugging Luke.
Yeah, well, because it's funny because they played a 3:00 game in Seattle, but for me it was 1:00 because I was in Seattle. So this will be the first time all season that I feel like there's football being played well into the afternoon by the Saints. But all right, who dat? Go Saints! Thanks everyone for hanging out. We'll be back at you on Monday with our post-game episode. Go Saints!
Coming for you, Baker.